couple of Agdamas. First of all, Baruch Hashem, we've had tremendous siyata d'shmaya with the Olam, as he said this last time as well. And I can sense it, and I've heard from some of the others as well, that Baruch Hashem, the Olam are gelling together, and it's the Olam are, getting through the Marmar Koimis in the way that we wanted to with the Adrocha that we're doing in Halacha L'Maisa Be'ez Hashem, and Chaz Hashem, it's a Gavaldig Matzav. Chaz Hashem, I've just heard from some of the boys, they say that every time they come downstairs, they give a peek through the door to see if the Olam are learning, and the Olam are learning. It's like, wow, this is unbelievable. Like, the guys are sitting and learning, like, no one's telling them to, it's Baruch Hashem. So the Olam over here is making a big Kiddush Hashem. So I go to Shkai for that. I hope the Olam are enjoying the Marmar Koimis up until now. Just for those of you that are wondering, like, why do we start with Hilchas Refuah? Like, there's a million halachas, Doraisa, Av Malachas. You have to start from a Durabonon. So Mustami, you saw it, right? At the end of, we're just going backwards here, but the end of C base, Mishabura says, very simply, it's Mefuish. If I'm not mistaken, the Gates said Rav Zimmerman, no longer the Gates said Rav, but when he was the Gates said Rav, told me that the first shir that he gave in Gateshead when he became the Gateshead Rav was Hilchos Refuah, as I stated in Halacha. The first shir that the Olam must do, the Olam have to know Hilchos Refuah. So that's why we're starting Hilchos Refuah, Be'ez Hashem. So, just to be clear, the purpose of these shiurim, just so the Olam should know clear, what's the tayeles, what's the she'ifa of these shiurim. We're going to try to bridge a couple of things. Be'ikah, we're trying to get to Halacha L'Maisa, because I really want the Olam to come out with Kla, Halacha L'Maisa, on the Sugya, on the Seifim, on the Simonim that we're learning. The problem with Siman Shin Chav Ches is you kind of have to know all of Siman Shin Chav Ches, and then you can go back and go to Halacha L'Maisa of each individual. Because, when you learn, for example, Sif Beis, which is Halachas of B'Koach Nefesh, you have to understand with many other things what means B'Koach Nefesh, what if it's Hutrat D'Chuya, what if he's got, for example, a Meichash at the same time of also having a Chodesh B'Koach Nefesh situation, are you Meikol, or you Machmeh, how does it work? A lot of different things come in together with that. And of course, there's a lot of other malachas that come together with Sipei Stamazoi. So it's hard for us to be able to go through Keseda and give you the halacha l'maisa on this sif and on this sif, but I will try as much as I can. I'm also going to try to speak out a couple of diukim, different ha'oras. I don't want to get too much lomdus, and I don't want to get also, I'm not going to repeat the Marmar Koimis that the Olam have learned already. I don't need to go through the Gemaras and the Tubi Sosef and everything that everyone's to learn, because Baruch Hashem, the Olam are very capable. So I don't think there's a ta'eles in me going through some of that, but it makes some of the Nekudas, different ha'oras, maybe diukim, and be'ikah some of the Gedolei Poiskim, so we can try to get some klokai in the Halacha L'Maisa based on what we have learned. So we'll start with today, Be'ez Hashem, a little bit of Sif Aleph Sif Beis. I do hope next week the Olam, for sure by the end of the week, maybe in the middle of the week, the Olam can finish the Marmar Koimis that were given out. It was meant to be made for 1 week, but give it a little bit of the Olam a bit more time. So I'm hoping we'll see what we do with the schedule of Shiur also. Gimel Daled Hey Vav, whatever it may be, Makash Al or whatever. But the Olam should try to finish up the Marmar Koimis for sure by the end of the week, but maybe even Tuesday, Wednesday, so we can already give out the next Marmar Koimis. After that, we can move on. So we'll start like this. The Issa of Refuah, as we know, and this everybody has seen clearly themselves, it's Gzeira Mishum Shkikas HaMamonim, which of course, as we mentioned last time, comes from the Malacha, the Av Malacha of Toichin. Now, if you look at the words of the Rif clearly says that the Gzeira over here is Mishum, the Rosh Hashanah Zaloshan, Mishum Sha'odum Bohul Al Refuah. Now, Sha'odam Bola for us means that a person is so busy, he's so under pressure with what's going on with his, healing process, that he's not going to have a chance to think and make the right decisions, and mainly he may come to doing something that he shouldn't be doing, which is, by the way, not for now, but it's, by the way, what the poskim speak out, that if a person has a prescribed medication that is for example, a 7 or 10 day prescribed, how long you have to take it for, that is really, according to most poskim, we'll get to it more Halacha L'Maisa later on, but there's no Issa. Why? Because if the whole Issa is Ba'al HaRefuah, when a person is not Ba'al HaRefuah, because he knows in advance before Shabbos that he has to take his medication for 7, 10 days, whatever it may be, so we're not Choshesh anymore. So then, of course, the kasha is going to be, what happens if he went to the doctor on Friday and he got it prescribed on Erev Shabbos and he starts the 7th day on Erev Shabbos, on Shabbos Kodesh? What din does that have? Say that we'll get to that. But upon him, the Rif seems to say clearly that's the Gzeira. That person will come to do Toichen Mitoich. He's Ba'al HaRefuah. That's what's going to happen. The Rambam clearly says a very similar thing also. You saw the Eglei Tal. I'm sure the Olam saw the Eglei Tal. he brings Shitas Rashi Nun Gimel Lamed Beis, where Rashi seems to learn a different mahalach. Where Rashi says the chashash over here is that a person will learn a heta for other things. In other words, from doing refuah, a person will learn to do shikas hamamonim. And the Egletal asks a kash on Rashi. The Egletal wants to know if that's the reason it's bala refuah, then I understand. I understand the gzeira is that a person is bohul al refuah, mimela is going to come to do something he shouldn't do. I get it. Says the Egletal, I get the gzeira. But if we learn the fi Rashi, the Egletal is a kasha. Tzorichin, what lemaisa was the gzeira? What are we saying? Why are a person's going to learn from doing a maisa of refuah? He's going to do a maisa that he shouldn't be doing. Now the maisa, the Egletal answers it. He goes to the sugya, the item saw it. I'm not going to go through the Egletal at this moment. But it's interesting to note that the Mishnah Berurah seems to go with Shitas Rashi, and if you look later on, again, this is why the whole thing is really connected, but if you look at the Mishnah Berurah Sikot Pei Vav, it seems to be that the Mishnah Berurah explains Pshat in the Shulchan Aruch, which is in Siv Chav Zayin, that if there's no bowl arufa, there's no Shikas Hamamonim in this case. It sounds like that the Mishnah Berurah held that the only reason that we're choishish that a person will do an Issa is because he's bowl arufa, that we're choishish in that case. But if we have a Metzias, whatever the Metzias may be, make up any case, that he's not Bo'olav for Osai, then there's no reason for the Gzeira. That seems to be the psak of the Mishnah Berurah. And by the way, it's not over here, only over here in Shin Chav Ches. It's also Mishnah Berurah in Siman Shin Lamed Beis, Siv Kotten Hey as well. However, you will notice, and I'll leave this one up to you, that you find many places in the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah that seems to be Machmeh Shitas Mipnei Aroyim. We are worried about yourself and others, which is the other Shita as well, that we're worried that a person will learn a heta from there. Now, the Mishnah Berurah Sikot in Gimel, we're talking about a Meichash, and we'll get to some of the Gedorim Be'ez Hashem in a moment. But just to understand this Mishnah Berurah Sikot in Gimel, where the Mishnah at the end of Siv Aleph, where the Mishnah Berurah says, "Va'afil al yedei goy, hainu afilu dvam shurak mishum shvus kam kim osa al yadai," through a goy, of course. Kevin shurak meichash ba'alma. We're dealing with a meichash ba'alma, which we know means he's got like a small pain. He's not a choila, he's a meichash, which we'll get to when we'll get to some of the Gedorim now, and we'll get to them more when we get to Siv Yud Zayin. But I'll go upon from the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, it comes out that if a person has a meichash on Shabbos, it's also to do, as the Lashon of Shulchan Aruch, shum refuah. Everything is included, even ali de goy. And as the Mishnah Berurah is masbir, it's mashma also that even a refuah that is not a malacha is also asa al yedei goy. And if you look not in the Mishnah Berurah, the Shulchan Aruch Harav also says the same thing in Siv Chav. Shulchan Aruch Harav also says that l'maisa if you have a meichash to do shum refuah, even if it's not a malacha, al yedei goy is going to be asa. So the Shulchan Aruch says that to do any refuah for a meichash is of course asa, and the Mishnah Berurah says even if it's not a malacha. But when the Shulchan Aruch says that it's also to do a refuah through a goy for a meichash, over here the Mishnah Berurah says that the kavanah of Shulchan Aruch is asa to ask a goy to do something that's even an issa d'Rabbanon. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. Now, if you looked, again, if I'm not sure you saw it in the Marmar Koimus, I think we gave this one out. The Shevet HaLevi Rav Ozna, in his Shuvas in Chenek Chesem and Samach Tes, is medayik from this Mishnah Berurah that only a refuah, that's a malacha, even if it's a d'Rabbanan, will be asa for a meichash to do, or on behalf of a meichash, even al yedei goy. However, a refuah that's not a malacha will actually be mutter through a goy. And he brings the Rakama Rishonim, the Rashba, and the Ramban that seem to be soymech on that. We'll get back to that in a moment as well. So we have from the Rishonim, Lemaisa, 4 categories of a choila. And they all, of course, have different nafkaminas, la'alach and lemaisa. So from the Rishonim, we have a choila sheyesh bo sakana, which of course means that basically you can mechal Shabbos, which of course we'll get to more when we discuss, I guess, the same base, but the Gedorim are much clearer when we get to Sif Yud Zayin. We have something called a Sakonis Eva, which again we have to be mazber what means an Eva, what's that Gedora of an Eva, which we'll get to again also in Sif Yud Zayin is one of the Ikar Seifim in Shin Chav Ches. We have a Choyle She'ein Bo Sakona, and we have over here in Sif Aleph, we have a Meichash. The only thing is that we have a new idea, which is by the way brought down in Shulchan Aruch and Shin Zayin Siv Hey, which is called a Miktsas Cholim. You see it from the Poskim also. right? You don't find it in the Rishonim, you don't really find it in the Gemara. It was the idea of a miktsas choili, that we can ask a goy to do a malacha d'Rabbanan, which will be a major nafkamina. Whatever a miktsas choili is, that means I would be able to ask a goy to carry medication in most places around the world that are not a Rishus HaRabim, right? It's only a Carmelist, whatever. Most places are not a Rishus HaRabim. Of course, a Rishus HaRabim is not a Geya. But if it's not a Rishus HaRabim, I can ask a goy to carry, which is an Issa D'Rabbanan, and a goy is asking is also an Issa D'Rabbanan, Shvus to Shvus, Miktsas Chayli, B'moka Miktsas Chayli is Muta. The problem is, where do we find this Miktsas Chayli, and what is the Geder of a Miktsas Chayli? So the Makor for a Miktsas Chayli really is the Gemara in Erevin Samach Zayin. Gemara in Erevin Samach Zayin base tells us that it's allowed to transport water through a goy for a child. We're talking about bris milah specifically, even if there's no eruv. The Rishonim over there, they're busy with what exactly we're dealing with. What's the child? We're talking about a child of bris milah, so it's b'mokeh mitzvah. Shvus to shvus b'mokeh mitzvah is going to be mutter. Fine. Shvus to shvus b'mokeh mitzvah, we know that's mutter. For example, if you have an air conditioner that breaks down in the shul, and you want to ask a goy to switch it back on, and you got a ganze olam, you got the olam is packed, it's boiling hot over there, it's in the middle of the summer. So let's not get into shaila of whether electricity is d'Rabbanan, d'Oraisa, boina chazanish, not boina Shlomo Zalman. Let's not go into that at this moment of time. The pashtus is that putting on air conditioning is an issa d'Rabbanan. So therefore, everyone holds that's a ramah refuah that you can ask a goy, it's a shvus to shvus, asking goy is one shvus, asking to do a d'Rabbanan is another shvus, v'moka mitzvah is going to be mutter. The eruv falls down, a classic Mishnah example, you can ask a goy, if it's not a d'oraisa way of putting it back up, you can ask them to do that. That's how most Rishonim learn the sugya in the Gemara in Erevin. However, the Rambam has a very different mahalach how he learns pshat. The Rambam in Perek Vav Halacha Tes has a different mahalach in that Gemara in Erevin Samach Zayin, and the Rambam says shvus to shvus gam b'miktsas choili muta. Now again, where do we find this? Where's a miktsas choili? What is a miktsas choili? So the Ravid asks a kasha on the Rambam, and the Ravid says, one second, hold on a minute, Rambam, what's this miktsas choili? If it's a choila, then you could do anything. Or your yid could do a d'Rabbanan. If it's not a choila, then why are you asking Monoshach? What's the pshat over here? So the Maggid Mishnah answers pshat for the Rambam, you look it up, and he says, Avadi, he doesn't mean choila kolaguf, or sakana seva for that matter, rather he means ktsas tsar. It's a lashon of the Ravid. Mimela, that's why the Rambam was makel only al yedei goy to do something over there. Now, halacha l'maisa, what is this ged of a miktsas chayli? Halacha l'maisa, you have a child is a bit more makel because children generally are considered to be a chayli she'ein bo sakana. By the way, we'll get to it later on in the Ramah in סימן in Sifyud Zayin, where a child has generally got a din of a chayli she'ein bo sakana. A small thing for a child has already got a din of a chayli she'ein bo sakana. A yid could do any come out, do a bonnet. Okay, we'll get to that. But al kaponim, let's say you have an adult that's more than a mechash. A mechash is a small headache, a little bit of a sore throat. This is more than that. It's more painful than that, but it's not nofal mishkav. He's not gone to bed, or he wouldn't go to bed, right? So what's the din in that case? We don't find it very clear gather. But whatever it is, it's mutter to ask a goy to do a d'Rabbanan. So Rav Vosner, again in that Shuvah Chelik Ches Samach Tes, brings a Beis Meah, where the Beis Meah says shvus to shvus, even for a mechash ba'alma's mutter, by the way. The Beis Meah has a big chiddush, Rav Vosner brings it, that the Beis Meah holds that a shvus to shvus, again, through a goy, obviously, the one of the shvusim have to do alidei goy, for a mechash ba'alma is 100% mutter, unlike the Magen Avraham, unlike the Mishnah Berurah. So Rav Vosner brings down this Beis Meah, and he says, listen, to be makel against, often the Magen Avraham, it's often the Mishnah Berurah, like that we're not going to do. We can't do that, even though Lemaisa he brings Vilna Gaon and others that were a little bit makel like the Beis Meah. But he says like this: if you have a suffix, if the choiler in front of you is a choiler that's a mechash ba'alma, or maybe a choiler she'ein b'sakana, or somewhere in between. So Rav Vosner says you can be makel halacha l'maisa through a goy to do a d'Rabbanan, because you have the Beis Meah, you have the Vilna Gaon to be Mosai, and therefore you can ask a goy to do a malacha d'Rabbanan for the case of a miktsas choiler. Again, our hagdora would be someone that's in more pain than just a little bit of a sore throat or a bit of a headache in that case. Now, the Beis Yosef brings the Maggid Mishnah and the Ran, the Rashba to bring all the categories that we just spoke about. The question is, what happens if it's going to get worse? Right now he's a mechash. Now mechash we have no heter for. There's no heter for a person to do a malacha, even anything. for a mechash ba'alma. Right? Now, you should know, by the way, when I give shiurim for the boys, there are a few halachas that are very hard to give shiur on. Right? There's a few. Baby wipes is for sure one of them. Okay, say that. They even for Avreichim. I once gave I used to give shiur in Ganigula for the oilam over there every Tuesday night, and whatever, we went through the sugya of schita. I'm not going through now. Whatever it is, maybe we'll go through it. And I do guarantee you, and I've the kollels that I've done in the previous past, when guys came over and chatted and said, "Oh, what do you mean? He says it's mutter." I said, "No, learn the sugya yourself. Come out with the sugya." I never yet, and Baruch Hashem, I've to had quite a few kollels. I never had anyone that came out with the sugya of learning the halacha of skita. You learn shenchof, it's often the Shulchan Aruch, it's often the Mechaba, whatever, that says, yeah, I can understand why it's mutter. I've never had anyone that came out with the sugya. If you have, please come over afterwards. I'm very happy to discuss it with you. And whatever, we can discuss it at a different time, not for now, maybe we'll get to it at a different time. But I spent, by the way, many hours in baby white factories to really go through and to try and figure it out. And I was in America, actually, one of the times in America, I went specifically to visit a plastic factory that make plastic bags. Because people sometimes say when you open up like a garbage bag, a bin bag, so sometimes, obviously not to separate it, right? That for sure, not that to be korea, machatech, whatever, but to open it, sometimes you hear like a tear. Right? And if you ever heard when you open up a nappy or a diaper and you open up the flaps, you can hear like a tear. So people are very nervous. Is that korea or not korea? So I have a good friend of mine that has a factory in Orange, West Orange. I think it's near Monsey, right? Somewhere over there. So he has a factory and he took me around in a golf car. It was a lot of fun. And he showed me how it's made. It's just an amazing thing. When you learn the mitzvahs, all of a sudden when you see how things are done, it changes completely. It's a very hard one to do that, by the way, by Pekuach Nefesh. And the sugyas of Refuah and Shabbos. I won't be able to do that. But when you teach Bochrim these things, they never heard of Shesa. They think you're completely crazy. What, you're telling me I can't take a pill on Shabbos? I have a headache. What's about? Oh, is that what the Rabbeinu Shalom wants for me? He wants me to suffer with my headache? It's amazing. This is one of those halachas that's like a very sensitive halacha that people don't really think. What happens if a person's going to get it worse? Right? You know yourself. Right now, not you, Chas v'Shalom, somebody is Shabbos morning, you wake up, you feel it, it's coming on, right? What's the din in that case? So we'll get to a lot more things, halacha and avaisa, but the makor for this is a makor chayim. The Kol Chaim says even if right now he's not a chodesh ein b'sakana, he's a mechash ba'alma, but he knows himself that he's going to turn into a chodesh ein b'sakana, then it's mutter even now to do that. And Rav Shlomo Zalman Amaisa passes this way halacha l'maisa, which means for Shabbos morning, if a person wakes up and he chaps, if I don't take something now, it's going to get worse. I'm not going to be able to make it to Kollel on Sunday morning. Then he has a heta to do that. By the way, in regards to mechash, because I only want to get to seat base, because seat base has a lot of different sugyas, there are a lot of exceptions for mechash ba'alma. We know that a mechash ba'alma does not take any medication. So we will see later on, as we get through the סימן, there are different exceptions that come out. For example, extracting a foreign body from like a thorn that goes into you. What happens if a person gets a splinter, gets a thorn? So he's in pain. It hurts him. Is that a mechash ba'alma? It's not a chodesh ein b'sakana. He's not going to bed for that. Is a person allowed to take that, or do we consider that to be refuah or not? So that we'll get to. But there's a major heta for koved abrius. Social dignity is a very important heta when it comes to mechash ba'alma, which means just like we know koved abrius doicha lo yishal seisha b'torah. We know that, for example, in Hilchos Tzitzis, right? For example, the Shulchan Aruch talks about it in Hilchos Tzitzis. What happens if a person by mistake, even though the halacha is you're meant to put your talis on and then your tefillin on first? What happens if a person takes out his tefillin first and he realizes, I forgot to put my talis first, and everyone's going to look at him and laugh at him and make a whatever it is, he's embarrassed? There's a heta for a person to do the opposite way around, to malam v'kodesh ve'ema ridim. But over here we find a heta for a person that is a person can do a malacha d'Rabbanon for the case of koved abrius. So for example, let's say a person has a situation of a runny nose. It's not bothering him more than a mechash. Doesn't really bother. He has a cold. It's a runny nose. No, he'll manage. He'll be okay. He can manage. It's very embarrassing to walk around with a runny nose. He has a simcha, he has a bar mitzvah, he's going to his shviga. He can't do that. He has a medication that's going to stop him taking the runny nose. Halacha l'maisa. Mechash ba'alma, he can't take medication. The answer is no. If it's b'mokim koved abrius, he will be allowed to take that medication. If it's a situation of tak of koved abrius. If it's not, then avada not. That Rav Shlomo Zalman says quite clearly. It's pulled down in Shmir Shabbos Kochosai, Perek Lamadalad, Ha'aron and Beis. You can look that one up over there. Any time there's koved abrius, there's a mokim to be makel. Who hadin? If it's b'mokem mitzvah, as we said previously. Any time there is a mokem mitzvah, for example, a person can't eat a Shabbos meal. He's free shvach. He's okay, he can manage, he can push himself, he goes to shul, whatever it is. But he feels a bit schwach. And he knows there's no way he can sit by a Shabbos Suda. Especially with the kids, especially with the Shven Shviga, he's not going to manage. What's he going to do? So I want to take something to give a bit of koyach to stop the pain for a little bit. But he's a mechash ba'alma. If it's going to help him go to shul, it's going to help him don't sit by the Shabbos meal, that is a heter for a person to be able to take that medication on Shabbos. Kodesh the Minchas Yitzchak has a tshuva about this. He brings the Radvaz and many others as well, and any other reasons why you could be mekel, that b'mokah mitzvah for a mechash, you can be mekel. There's also another nekuda over here. What if you had, for example, a blocked nose and you want to use something like Vicks, right? In America they have these things. Vicks, you put it on the nose and you smell it and it opens up, now you can breathe. Is that refuah? Is that considered to be a refuah? Now there's a lot of discussion that we have to get to. We're going to get to much later on by the Magen Avraham that talks about machazik mizgoy, by vitamins or vitamins. Are you allowed to take these things? Are not allowed to take these things? Is it a refuah? Headache pills, is it actually a refuah? Or does it just block the pain? That's not called a refuah, it just blocks the pain. We'll get to a lot of these shilas. But Rav Shlomo Zalman talks about the idea, he doesn't say the word Vicks, but something similar to that, and he says it doesn't heal anything, just makes your breathing easier. If that's the case, no problem. There's no issa in taking Vicks on Shabbos, even if just your breathing hurts you, which is a mechash ba'alma. There's no refuah involved over here. Reb Chaim Nona Meister in the Ksotz HaShulchan and Siman Kuf Lamed Ches wants to say, and I asked this once also to Rafal Zatzal. The Rafal told me also he wanted a taina that it has nowadays. A lot of the Vicks have, refuah things, ingredients in it that help for the future as well. That's what Rafal told me, that bismanenu, it does contain medication as well. In which case you have to know which one you're taking. Maybe they're different brands, but if it's one that doesn't have any medication whatsoever, it just helps the breathing process, that would not be a problem. Let's move on now. Be'ikah to see base that I want to get to. And again, there's a lot more things that we have to get to in Beis Hashem as we go through some of the Seifim we're going to try to mention. Let's talk about Pekuach Nefesh. Let's talk about Seif base, right? Gemara, Baba Kama, Pehei Amud Aleph is really the makar for a lot of things, right? The Pasuk says, V'rape Yerapeh, which here the Gemara tells us in Baba Kama, Pehei Amud Aleph, Mikan, from here, from these words, we have a rishus for a doctor to heal. Sas Tosis the Kasha, why do we need it twice? I could have just learned it from once. And he answered that I would have said that a makkah that came from a person in a chanami, that a person can heal. But a makkah that came from Shemayim, says Tosfos, maybe not. Mechatesi, you can heal something that the Rabban Shem gave you. Kamash Malon, you're absolutely allowed to do that, and it's 100% mutter for a person to heal. Those are the klolim that Tosfos spells out over there. Now, Lemaisa, Pekuach Nefesh, we know that when a person has a muscle Pekuach Nefesh, there's a mitzvah to Machal Shabbos. That's what we learned, right? The Shulchan Aruch says very clearly in C base, mitzvah, the chalal olav es hashabbos. Now, by the way, there's a moed galosh in the Refuah Kodesh. The Refuah Kodesh brings that B'midbar Lamed Aleph Yud Gimel. The Refuah Kodesh says it's not even called chilul. It's not called chilul Shabbos. He calls it shmir Shabbos. The Refuah Kodesh calls it, when you are machal Shabbos, what we call it, for a chodesh, for yesh bo sakana, for Pekuach Nefesh purposes, you are not being machal Shabbos. And by the way, that's an important thing to remember, because there are certain things that people are very sensitive about, right? Again, Rabbonim that have to deal with shilas of people who have to eat on Yom Kippur have a very hard time with this, because imagine telling a from a Yid, you have to eat on Yom Kippur. It doesn't work. Right? I think I heard this from Rabbi Leff. He was a Rav in Miami before he came to Eretz Yisrael. And he said one time there was someone in the shul that was a Chodesh Yeish B'Sakana Pekuach Nefesh situation, whatever it was, and he told them that you have to eat on Yom Kippur. You absolutely have to eat. So he came Yom Kippur afternoon, guy was davening in the shul. He says, how you feeling? Is everything okay? So you ate something this morning? He said, no, that I can't do. I haven't eaten my whole life. I'm not starting now to eat. So he said to him, okay, I'm now going to stop giving you aliyah in my shul on Shabbos. I said, wow, what did I do wrong? I don't understand. I'm fasting on Yom Kippur. He said, I don't know. You obviously have a different God in your religion, because the same God that told you to fast also told you now to also eat. So, but to explain to women, especially when it comes to Yuledes and everything, which we'll get to Beis Hashem, Shin Labed, it's not called Shabbos. It's called Shmir Shabbos. It's the lashon of the Refuah Kodesh over there. And as we said, it's a mitzvah to Machal Shabbos, Kol Azoros, Harizet Meshubach, and Haray As we saw from the Gemara in Yuma Peidalid, Yerushalmi as well, the Ramban and everyone else that we quoted over here, which is also important. Now, why Lamaisa is this so? So the Olim probably saw the Gemara in Yuma brings Lamaisa 7 reasons. There are 7 reasons why it is so that we are allowed to Machal Shabbos and should Machal Shabbos for Pekuach Nefesh, for a Choila sheyesh bo sakona shabsosei tishmori ki kodesh shilachem v'shabbanei yisov v'chai b'hem. You go over and over all the reasons. Halacha Lamaisa, the Maskana Gemara is clear that it is v'chai b'hem. You look at the Rif, that's the psak of the Gemara, and if you look at the Mishnah Berurah base, that it's clear that that is the psak halacha Lamaisa. That is the reason why we do it is because of v'chai b'hem, which means is because of v'chai b'hem v'lo sheyomus b'hem. We want people to live by the Torah and not to die by the Torah. Obviously, one of the major shilas is, what if you have a vegetable? What if you have a person who he's out, no shaykhs to anything? So is that v'chai b'hem? Right? So you could say, Yesh koin aluma b'sha'ah achas, Rebbe tells us in the Gemara, which means that if a person has a hiru tshuva, right? Even if hanachanami, sometimes they found medical studies that even though they're not responding to anything, but their brain often is working. So if the brain is working, you can have a hiru tshuva. They have hiru tshuva. In hanachanami, in the medical world, by the doctors, they're not maskim to this, they don't understand this, they don't appreciate this, but us didn't understand that a person can have a hiru tshuva, Yesh koin aluma b'sha'ah achas. So even for a vegetable, the maisa, the post can say, Havadikim machal Shabbos, such a thing. It's not even a kasha. Not even a kasha. I was once involved in a case of a situation where there was a from person in my Kollel who was a Baal Tshuva, that none of his family were religious. His father was a Meisah Shaya. His father was in the hospital in Chutz Laretz, and the kids the siblings called up this younger man, the only from one in the family, and said, "We're just letting you know that we have come to a decision that this is not the mahalach that we wanted to take. It's costing too much money for the hospital. You know, there's living social, there's all standards. There's younger people that come into the hospital. We're not giving them beds. So, Mitzvah Hashem, tomorrow we're going to be, pulling the plug." So I was involved in the Shaila, and we told this person to take a flight on Shabbos to be able to go to Chutz Laretz and, change. Only if he was there in person was the only way that they were able to listen to him and change the decision. We told him to fly on Shabbos. Okay, there was a lot of Shailas that had to be dealt with in the same time. But even if the person's a vegetable, Avadi Machal Shabbos for that. Now this idea of Hazor is Harizem Shubach. What does it really mean?
Someone who's not religious, you Machal for them?
Yeah. Oh, we're going to get to that, yeah. We're going to get to that in a minute. Good question. Someone's not religious. Very good. So before we get to that, this idea of Hazor is Harizem Meshubach, right? Well, what does it mean? What's the Geder? Why do we behind Meshubach about what? So the Makor, of course, we saw in the Gemara in Yuma Peidalit. If you look at the Rashash says like this. Says the Rashash, if you know for sure, 100% that there's going to be a Chilul Shabbos for this Chayla. You know that I'm going to have to Machal Shabbos for this Chayla. But the Maisa, I know, medically, I know 100% responsibly, it does not have to be done right now. Over Shabbos, over the next 24 hours for sure. But right now, I don't have to Machal Shabbos. So the Rashash says, even if it can wait a few hours, Hazor is Harizem Meshubach. That's what the Gemara means. The Gemara doesn't mean Chapara and go quickly. Of course you have to go quickly. It's a Pekuach Nefesh. It means in a situation, says the Rashash, that I could wait. It will not damage the Chayla whatsoever. And I should still Hazor is Harizem Meshubach. Which means, why should I do that? I was Pekuach Nefesh. Again, if I know 100%, which I do, that it's not a suffix that maybe I won't need it and I'm going to wait to see. Later on we'll see that if I'm not sure if he needs it and it's not going to damage him if I wait, could be I have to wait. We'll get to that. Over here, 1,000%, the doctors have told me, within 24 hours you're going to Machal Shabbos, whatever the case will be. I can wait 4 hours. On that, the Rashash says the Gemara means Hazor is Harizem Meshubach. The Rambam, what's the Chiddush of the Gemara? What would you have said otherwise? Let it be? No, so here we're saying Hazor is Harizem Meshubach means since we're dealing with the Nefesh of Yisrael, we want to be Hazor is Harizem Meshubach. You know you're going to Machal Shabbos. So what's enough Gemina if I do it now or do it in 4 hours? Als Hilchos Shabbos is enough Gemina, right?
That's what I'm asking. What's the Chiddush?
The Chiddush is Bizoros when it comes to Nefesh Yisrael. That's what the Gemara is telling us. That's it. Als Hilchos Shabbos, again, if it's so dealing with the Chodesh Yesh Pasakoni and Machal Shabbos, I don't need the Gemara to tell us Hazor is Harizem Meshubach. That's why the Rashash has a Chiddush of something that's not Poshut Pshat. So why did you learn Gemara? How did you learn the Gemara? What was the Gemara telling us? Do it quickly. I have a Havamina, I'm going to do it slow. What's the Chiddush of the Gemara? What's the Gemara telling me?
It's just better to learn the Gemara that
now
you
what?
think maybe I can wait till after Shabbos. Then
No. That can't be Pshat. If the
chiddush to say Azar is in Meshubach.
right, the Rashash is letting us know. Vada, you're going to Mechal Shabbos this Shabbos.
I don't understand what he's
No.
What's he getting?
Aus der Zwiesel, Shabbai. Aus der Zwiesel.
It's a klal.
Anytime you, one second, anytime you find, yeah, in Chanam, it's regular mitzvahs.
Gemara,
You're telling me he's getting Mechal Shabbos anyway. Why would I send his Svara? Should wait 4 hours?
Because if I don't need the Mechalal now, I would have said, let's wait 4 hours and do it then.
On what basis?
Because at the moment I need it, that's when I do it. Mechates, I do it before I need it. You could have said, if I don't need it right now, don't do it. Kamash Malon says, the Rashash, the Gemara is telling us, no, there's the Indian of Zrizas, if you know Vadei Chilul, do it now, even though you don't need it, which means there's no personal reason to do it, yeah? Now, that's the Rashash, by the way. The Rambam... No. Well, the emes is when we talk about Shinui, which we'll talk about later, through a goy, through a child, through a woman, through a Shinui, there are klolim when it comes to a Shinui. That sometimes, if you're not bohol b'chlal, then of course you should use a Shinui. We haven't got to that yet. But in Achanami, there could be enough communities over there. For example, childbirth. You're not be'etzem bol. You know it's happening. You've prepared it. According to Sefer Chasidim and Shin Lamed, you've even put like a bag by the front door. So you know this is happening. You're not be'etzem bol. I will tell you that Rosh Yeshiva of Shaimek Zatzal used to say, he wasn't a big fan of Shinuim. So when it comes to Pekuach Nefesh, don't mess around. He does it with his knuckle, he misses the number on the phone, he has to redo it again, it makes problems. Pekuach Nefesh, just go. But we'll get to Klolim of Shinoi Be'ez Hashem soon. But it could be enough Kamina, that's true. Now the Rambam, in Perek Beis, Alocha Tazayin, says a slightly different Lashon, but it's a similar idea, and it seems to be much the same idea as the Rashash. Okay, fine. But then in Perek Beis Halacha Gimel, the Rambam says, so they want to say Pshat in the Rambam is like the Rashash. That means that the Meister, even if you don't need to do it miyad, don't delay it, because even if you could wait, he could wait 2 hours, nothing's going to happen to him if it's klar that way. Then, Hamakdim Hare Zeh Meshubach. So Moshe, based on this, has a tshuva, and he goes to Moshe in Chelik Gimel, Siman Samach Tes. What happens like this? What happens if you have a situation that now there's no sakana? There's absolutely no sakana whatsoever. But the doctors say sometime on Shabbos it's going to turn into a sakana. What do you do in such a case? So maybe in that case you should say, don't do it. Don't do it because maybe you'll be healed. Maybe some nace will happen and you'll get a refuah and you won't need it. So maybe don't do anything. Zukah Moshe, at the end of the day, the Rashash is telling us it's not going against the Rashash. In other words, Rav Moshe is saying that if it's a situation now of a non-sakana, but it will become a sakana, don't be Mechal Shabbos. It's not a sakana right now. When it becomes, no, it's right now not a sakana. Enochanami. Says Rav Moshe, against the Rashash. So you're saying Enochanami. It's not why, because Rashash is talking about right now it's a massive sakana. Memela, that's why he says to go Hazeh B'Shubach. Just to clarify that case, Rav Moshe brings that down. Now Reb Kiva Eiger, in Tshuvas, by the way, Madura Kama Siman Samach, says what happens if it's not a sakana mamish, or even a suffix sakana, but it's so bad that 1 in 1,000 do have a sakana from this. So right now it's not a sakana, and most people are okay. 1 in 1,000 chance, Reb Kiva Eiger asks, do come to a sakana. So Reb Kiva Eiger says absolutely do not look at this as sakana. We don't take statistics. We don't say, 1 in 1,000 die, so memela, it's a suffix sakana zavoshes. We don't do that. That's not the klolim. The klolim is that a suffix means an emes like a suffix. Right? It doesn't have to be 50%, 60%, whatever. But it doesn't have to be a 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000 is something that you're not going to look at as a suffix sakana, and therefore you have no heta to Machal Shabbos. And Chazon Ish, by the way, also when he talks about this, which is important Gedorim when you learn see base and beyond, is do not call everything a suffix sakana. So the Fasha, don't call everything suffix Pekuach Nefesh because it might lead to a sakana. Right? We all know that when a person has Rahman strep, most people, you take antibiotics and you move on. You go on in life, right? Say you stay in bed a day or two, not whatever. Depends if you're in Kollel or you go to work. That normally depends how it goes. But I'll upon him, you take a couple of medication and you move on. Big deal. No. There is a chance for strep to develop into something terrible. Does that mean every strep is a sopic or an episode of the nish? But the Chazon Ish is an Indian Lashon. In Kovetz Igus, he writes, Chazon Ish says, if you call every single situation a sofa b'koach nefesh, people are going to start opening up stores on Shabbos because they say, if I don't have panos, I'm not going to be able to eat. That's the Lashon of Chazon Ish, which is why a person has to be careful and absolutely don't do that. Now,
What is that?
Of what?
So not 1 in 1,000, so 1 in 100.
It has to be, Rav Shlomo Zalman always said that if during the week you treat this as a sakana, and you will call an ambulance, for example, on a Wednesday, then you do that on Shabbos also. That was what Rav Shlomo Zalman generally used together. But I think the more we learn, the more we'll understand what really other Gedarim are, because again, the Shulchan Aruch being so many different examples that we'll get to.
So
Use your personal feelings? Meaning, because we say you're not supposed to go ask.
We're going to get to that. So that going to ask, by the way, we'll talk about that in a second, but it has to go by you. It can't go by the Kollel unless you have an expert there, like a Tzolem member or a doctor, or you know something about it. But if you're the only person there, you have just become the expert. And
So
even if?
like
a drama queen.
No, so again, if you know yourself or the patient to be such a person, then you know that you can calm down and it's okay and everything will be fine. But by the way, later...
Like, how you supposed to, like...
If you have a suffix, this is taco suffix. For example, let's say you have a child, a young child, right, that falls off a bunk bed, right, that's really bad, and they're clutching their stomach in pain. We'll get to that more later on by Makash al-Kollel, of course, but that's a suffix of Kollel. At the end of the day, we don't know what's going on over there. Who knows if they punctured some inner organ? That could be a problem. So therefore, that is a suffix. Now, maybe it's not. You're right, but that could be. That makes sense for that to be a suffix sakana. When a person faints, it's not considered to be, especially if it's even on Yom Kippur, it's not necessarily a suffix b'koach nefesh. It could be, depending on the person. Maybe they're diabetes. Maybe they're allergic to things. Who knows what's going on? So if you don't know, it could be a suffix. An older person, for sure, yeah. A younger child, when they hurt themselves, obviously much more susceptible to these things. You have to use your common sense. I think the more we get through Shem Chavches, the more we'll understand a lot about these Gedorim.
In the middle of the week, you wouldn't call an ambulance, that you would take him to the doctor.
Same idea. Yeah, you wouldn't just sit at home and say, yeah, it's fine, Shafala, it's okay, don't worry. You have to look at the Gedorim that way. Let's just finish.
Emotional help.
Very good. The Gemara talks about it. We're going to get to it Be'ika in Siman Shin Lamed, because the main sugya is by Yoledes, right? The Gemara talks about, can I put on a light for a woman giving birth if she doesn't need the light? But she wants the light, because she thinks that she'll feel better if the light's on. The midwife says I can see perfectly, right? Or if you want to get into this, maybe we'll get into this also. Are you allowed to ask someone to carry the Noimeli Melech Tfus Rishon, which is the skull to put under the pillar, b'shas, the whole thing, in a place where there's no Eruv, right? Are you allowed? These are big shilas, right? There was a shilah, again, we'll get to it maybe when we get to it, but these were big shilas. Rav Shlomo Kluger, Tuv Tam Vadas, has a big tshuva about someone that asked it was in Belz, I think it was Belz Rebbe, no? Yeah. They asked to do a school, to go daven to the Rebbe when they're giving birth, right? To tell the Rebbe that, to daven for him. The questions are, you allowed to machal Shabbos for a scholar? That's the kasha. I allowed to machal Shabbos for a scholar. Does it work? No, okay, not for now, but it's a great question. Al Kapone, maybe we'll get to the Shin Lamed. Now, that's the Chazon Ish, that was from Kivega. Now, the Makar, as we said, and this is the Maskonas Gemara of being machal Shabbos b'koach nefesh, is v'chai b'hem. We want people to live and not die by the Torah. Torah is to live. So we have to live by that. That's what it is. Now, if that's the case, so what happens if you have a choila that doesn't keep mitzvahs, doesn't keep the Torah? Right? That was your kasha. What if you have a Fried doesn't keep? So the Pri Megadim, if you look this one up, or maybe you saw it, says a mumul lechal Shabbos. You absolutely are not allowed to be Machal Shabbos for such a thing. The Mishnah Berurah, by the way, later on, it's in Shin Chav Tes, which is the main sugya of Pekuach Nefesh, in Shin Chav Tes. The Mishnah Berurah says, if you have a mumul hachis, he's bedafka, not keeping Shabbos, then it's osa for a person even to save him during the week. Even on a Wednesday, the Mishnah Berurah says, you're not allowed to save him, you can't do anything for him. Now, Lamaisa, before the Olam gets upset, the Chazon Ish says very clearly, in Yeridei Siman Beis, Chazon Ish says, that nowadays, most of these are called what we call a Tinnik Shenishba, right? And by the way, don't think that's not true. Most of our Fry Yidden out there are Taka, Tinnik Shenishba. And the Chazon Ish says why? And you could tell me, what do you mean they're not Tinnik Shenishba? We have internet, we have news, they know what's going on in the world, they see everything, don't tell me Tinnik Shenishba. They are. And the Chazon Ish said, have you sat down, or has anyone sat down with these Fry Yidden and explained them the beauty of Yiddishkeit, showed them what it's all about? No. All they see is on the news and the Hafganaz and these sorts of things. What do you expect from them? That's called the Tinnik Shenishba. And that's the Chazon Ish, that's the Chalkas Yaakov, that's the Tzitz Eliezer, and whatever it is. Mimela. So that's another heta. The other heta nowadays is Misham Eva. Mishumeva, in other words, if nowadays they don't respond, that's going to make big news. It's not going to make it to NKY status. It's going to make big news. And if that's the case, it's going to get around that they don't do that. Oy vavoy, that's going to be big problems. So Mishumeva is not. By the way, there's some soifa. There's some soifa.
Magdir it that way, though. If you sit down with someone,
Yeah,
that will be mafkia.
It could do. Take him out of a tinnik shenishba because someone actually took the time to explain to him what it means Yiddishkeit, what it means the Torah wants from you.
That will ruin his status as a tinnik shenishba.
I mean, you shouldn't do that, you're saying.
I'm asking.
It's a good hurry. Maybe you shouldn't do it because you're making from that to that.
No.
Yeah, but Chazon Ish said they're alternate. Unless you've done that, they're a tinnik shenishba.
So really, right away, they could lose it
No.
one day. They could lose it. They go to yeshiva one day and they hear the shmooze.
If it's the right shmooze. Depends what it is.
Like it,
Depends with yeshiva, depends with shmooze, I don't know. But it could be a. Huh?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
just Friday night, the IDF, before you come in, they have the people have to do different things. And there were a few people coming to Snezher Morcheva for a Suda Friday night, a Haredi Suda, that was one of the options. People from Tel Aviv, they never had anything, no exposure or anything. So that's it, no more. They went to shul.
If they were explained in the right way, if they understood it, if it was done correctly, maybe you need 4 or 5 times, who knows? It's hard to know what the gedder is, but what he's saying...
that way.
No, not just, it didn't mean a one-time thing, but did anyone actually give him the Kishmak? If not, he's a Tinnik Shenishba. Mishumeva. Goyim is the same head to Mishumeva. Some Sofer, by the way, is a different thing. Some Sofer is a Moide Gezach. He says the reason, another reason Machal Shabbos, because maybe he'll be Maharid Tshuva. There was a story here in Eretz Yisrael of from a Chassidish guy that got a call on Shabbos, someone driving a motorbike. So he chaps, obviously it's on Nebuch, it's probably someone that is in Eretz Yisrael, it's in one of the areas that makes sense, and he went down there and he said over afterwards that the guy started to cry. The guy who was on the floor. He said to the guy, "You're a Chassidish guy, you're keeping Shabbos, I don't keep Shabbos, and you at the Machal Shabbos for me?" Some Sofer says Efsheh Hira Tshuva is good enough reason to Machal Shabbos. But Mishum Eva is the main heter.
That's quite controversial.
What?
That should always apply.
That what? By a Yid, for sure. Some Sofer says that's the reason why you Machal Shabbos for everyone, correct? For that reason. You've got Mishum Eva, you've got Hira Tshuva, and you've got Tinnik Shenishba. You've got all, I know 100%. Across the board, we'll Machal Shabbos for these things. Let me just finish off. Mate Ephraim, by the way, you look this one up. Tofei Shud Chesekot Nazayin. Mate Ephraim says every Rav, every Posik has to have these halachas shegura bepiv. You can't look up Svarim. I had a guy come to me Shabbos afternoon, and he wanted to know whether he should Machal Shabbos. One of his children, mamash, opened up skin. It was a kefela chamatzev. What are you doing over here? Go. Right? By the way, I asked him after Shabbos what happened. He said, no, it was only Shabbos afternoon. I waited a couple of hours till Motzei Shabbos to take him. Shaita, what can I tell you? Right? That's what it is. As I say, I'm not my Lashon, sorry. It's the Lashon of Chazal. Lashon of Shiur. Al Kaponim, a Rav has to have these halachas, because if you have to look up Sfarim, it's a big problem. There's a few halachas you have to know quick. Huh?
Ram goes against the Nishal also.
Correct. Very good. There's a few halachas, by the way, that every Rav has to have claw. One of them is Koach Nefesh. The other one is in Hilchas Sefer Torah. If you don't know Hilchas Sefer Torah and you're in the middle of Kriyas HaTorah and a Shaila comes up, you're like, just give me a few minutes to go, to go look up a Mishnah Berurah and some Membob, what to do L'maaseh if you have a Torah for Sefer Torah. You can't do that. And Be'etzem Hilchas Avelis. Right? It's also like, happens unfortunately, Rahman Aleinu, happens something very quickly, and a Rav has to know, what's the situation with the Goises? Okay, not for now. The Aruch HaShulchan, by the way, brings a Ozurah that says the Yerushalmi of Harizeh, Hanishal Harizeh Maguna, is only the case of Bohol. If it's not bowl, then you can ask a kasha. That's the Aruch HaShulchan brings the Ozurah, a pshat in the Yerushalmi, that it really depends if a person is bowl or not a person is bowl in that case. Vavozna, again, asked a kasha about if you're not sure if your situation is B'Koach Nefesh. The Yerushalmi that says if you have a matzah B'Koach Nefesh, if you ask a kasha, is there Shofar Damim? Zuk Vavozna, if you're not sure if you're matzah B'Koach Nefesh, if you're really not sure. If you're really not sure, then you're 100% mutter to ask, as long as it's not going to cause a sakana for the choila. Okay, there's obviously other kashas, hutra and techuya, which we have to get to, and we'll get to it as we go on, maybe later on in Sif Dalet. Be'ez Hashem, next week we're going to get to the sugas of Makkah Shel Kollel. Be'ez Hashem, B'siyat Tishmaya. Okay, Mr. Hashem.